Hello, everybody. Hello again. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. I was just live like a second ago, and I sure hope that I put all my settings on my computer back to where they should be, because I just had to reboot it and then come back and go live again. So hopefully everything's working fine. You can hear me, you can see me. Welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. The title of this episode is What is Leadership and Who Would Care About It? Sort of venturing a little bit outside of the core HR type stuff. This is more for, at least the title is more for if you are getting like a management type job or supervisor job or something like that, where leadership is something that might be discussed in an interview, anything like that. We're going to talk about that. But as always, this is just a interactive live stream where you guys can ask questions, usually anything related to careers, job search, networking, resumes, interviews, negotiation, changing jobs, being out of the workforce for a while, coming back in, any kind of related HR thing. And this is where we also talk about kind of what actually goes on in the real world, you know, not just the theory behind how this stuff should work, but how it actually does work in the real world. Warts and all. So incompetent recruiters, rude recruiters, seemingly contradictory actions by employers or people, right? That's what we're talking about. So I see there are 9 people here. Thank you for joining me today. Yeah, get in the chat. Let me know what you kind of are wondering about, struggling with, especially with the topic here. What is leadership? I'm going to start off by just talking about that. And if you have a question about that, great. If you have questions about other things, or you just want to say what your situation is and have me react to it or something, that's fine too. So let's start with this. You know, some people are going for jobs that are above the sort of worker level. So either they're at the supervisor level, or they're at the frontline manager level, or they're higher than that, mid-level manager, executive level, you know, that kind of thing. Leadership is something that everybody and their brother talks about. Very few people seem to understand what it is, but everybody talks about it. It doesn't stop anyone from saying all kinds of things about it. Whenever I go on LinkedIn, for example, it's like you look at the feed, you know, your feed of like, I don't know, if it was supposed to be originally your connections only, but they put so much crap in there, and it's all this misinformation about things like leadership. You know, everybody loves to shoot their mouth off about it while simultaneously being completely wrong. You know, listen, I mean, for what it's worth, I have an MBA and I was a CEO of a company. I'd like to think I know a little bit about it, but, you know, the question is like, what are people saying about it? Why is it a thing you might want to talk about, say in a job interview, or if you're putting it on your resume and saying that, you know, you have leadership skills or something? What do those actually mean? Let's get into it. And as always, get in the chat, because, you know, this is interactive. So I'm just going to talk about this loosely, and if you guys want to jump in, I'll be happy to answer your questions. By the way, before we get started, just once again, a shout out to my YouTube channel members. You guys are awesome. My Patreons, my super thanks donors, and of course, to my participants. Thank you for being here. You are awesome. If you are looking for a job right now, you're awesome. You're doing some self-improvement, and that's what it's all about. You keep doing self-improvement, you're going to crush this, you know, just a matter of time. Incidentally, I was just reviewing something this morning, and something I haven't really mentioned recently on my channel that's very important is that a lot of job searches, you know, when you get to the final 3, you know, a lot of job search, you know, you start with like usually about 6 candidates, you know, that's kind of give or take the amount of interviews you do. You bring in 6 candidates or so. Obviously, it varies quite a bit, but that's about the average number. And then in your you do maybe an initial round, and you could do 1, 2, or 3 rounds, and then you whittle it down to the final 3. That's usually the standard way of doing it for a lot of professional jobs. Bring in 6 people, do an initial round, whittle that down to 3, do a second round of interviews, and then make a decision. And I got to say, something I don't talk about enough is when you look at the final three, a lot of times it's a very tough decision. It's a very close call. You usually don't get like one person being the clear winner that's head and shoulders above everyone else. You usually don't get that. You usually get three people. For a start, they're all technically qualified to do the job. And then you could work with them, on a personal level. In a job interview, they seem perfectly fine. You don't have any objection to them, but the thing is, the three people are different. Maybe one person has slightly more experience, but another person has a little bit more education. Like how do you compare people side by side? There is no real way, right? This is common knowledge. And so some of those decisions are very, very tough, and if you make it to certainly the final three or the last interview, and even before then, but you don't get the offer, it's like, don't take it to be like, oh, there's something wrong with me and I'm no good, because that's not accurate. Anyone who's selected for a job interview, they are technically qualified on paper to do the job, right? That should be obvious. It doesn't make sense for an organization to bring in a candidate to a job interview who on paper is not qualified to do the job. What would be the point of that? It would be a waste of time. Every candidate that's brought for an interview on paper is qualified. It's not about whether you're qualified or not. It's about soft skills. It's about who you are and who the hiring manager, like what type of person are they looking for? Do they care more about education or more about experience, right? So it's not about being more qualified. So never come away from like those situations thinking like, I'm no good, I'm bad, I'm not qualified. That's incorrect. Okay, great. We got some people in the chat. So Jean says, hi, sir. I watch your videos and I want to thank you for your great insights. I have an interview tomorrow for a position on the central bank in my country. What would be your advice to prepare? Well, like I can't speak to the specifics. Like I'm not in the banking industry and I'm not in your country. I don't even know what country you're in, but I'm not there, I'm sure. So it would just be general advice. What I would say is there's some standard things you do to prepare for a job interview. If your interview is tomorrow, hopefully you've done a lot of these things already because time is getting short. Make sure that presumably the answers to like the sort of standard cliched job interview questions, right? So things like, tell me about yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What salary do you need? Why did you leave your last job? How do you handle stress? Things like that. Presumably, you know the answers to those, right? In addition, you hopefully are preparing for behavioral interview questions. That's where they ask you, the question usually starts with, tell me about a time. So tell me about a time you had a conflict with your boss. How did you resolve it? Things like this. Tell me about a time you showed creativity to solve a problem at work. How did that go? Tell me about a time that, you collaborated with people very effectively that resulted in a major success, right? So they're going to be asking for a story from your past, and everybody's going to have different stories because we're all individuals. We have different experiences. So hopefully you know how to answer those. My recommendation is to you rehearse, you vet 10 stories from your career. Probably 5 of your most shining moments, like accomplishments you've had, and then the other 5 are conflicts with a boss or coworkers, showing creativity, doing something that was hard, or maybe even a failure, but you learned from it and it turned out positively in some way. Okay, so if you prepare those 10 stories or 10 similar stories, then you practice saying them, usually like in the star format or something similar. So you can tell the story properly, but briefly. right? You're not there for 10 minutes telling a story. You're there, you can, in 45 seconds or something, you can tell a story. And you vetted the story so you know it's appropriate to tell. Then, any question they ask you that's a behavioral question, you're going to be pulling out one of those 10 stories as your answer, whichever story it most closely resembles, depending on the question. And you might have to tweak it a tiny little bit, but basically that way you'll have an answer ready to go. It's on the tip of your mind, like it's at the forefront of your mind, ready to go. You say it in a very compact, efficient way. It doesn't take the entire interview, and it doesn't portray you in a bad light. It portrays you in a very good light. That's how you prepare for those. And then beyond that, the only other thing you'd have to do, I think, is do some basic research on the company. So if this is a central bank, find out all you can about like what they do and what their culture is. See if you can do some research online for a couple minutes. See if you can see pictures of how they dress if you don't know. You show up dressed and looking like that. So when you show up, you look like you belong there. You don't look like you totally don't belong there and then you have to try and change their mind. You look like you belong there. You're the person, you know? That helps. Okay, so like in a nutshell, I would say you do that and you should be okay. You know, you're going to give it your best shot. And beyond that, it's just statistical probability. Whether you get it or not, it's all just a throw of the dice, right? You know, if you do that, you'll probably represent yourself very well. And then the only thing it depends on is, are you the kind of person they had in mind? And you have absolutely no control over that. Hopefully, they just happen to be looking for someone exactly like you, in which case, congratulations, it's going to go very well. If they just happen to be looking for someone else, for whatever reason, they've got it into their head that they're just looking for a different type of person, or someone with different backgrounds or different personality, there's absolutely nothing you can do about that. And the next role that you interview for, they will be looking for someone like you. So go down there, give it your best shot. Don't sweat it. You're going to be fine. And, you know, pretty soon something will work out. Let's hope it's this, but if in case it isn't, it's all right. You're going to be fine. And best of luck to you. Jean says, wow, thank you very much. I really appreciate your answer. By the way, I'm from Haiti. Okay, right on. Right on. I hear it's beautiful down there this time of year. I'm in the Arctic. I don't know if you can see that. That's like an accurate view of what it looks like outside my window. Tech Programmer is back. Says, is it bad to have mixed experiences such as 2 IT technician roles and a software development role? Will the interviewer think the candidate has lost their path? Who cares, you know? And I mean that in a good way. Like, look, okay, an IT technician and a software developer, those aren't that far apart in the grand scheme of things. Like, okay, yes, one's coding, the other one's like presumably dealing with equipment. You know, you can get a lot more diverse experience that. You could, you know, what was it? Accountant to lion tamer, you know, like you can get, you know, a lot more bigger jumps than that. And hey, if you had to do it because of COVID or because of, you know, things that were happening in your industry, whether you're in IT or whatever, you know, it's like, who cares? You have what you have. You know what I mean? As long as you have an explanation for it that makes sense. If they were to ask you, you know, why the sort of like, you know, IT stuff and developer stuff, like, you know what I mean? And just as an example, you could say like, well, first of all, COVID, you know, I had to go where they were looking and they were hiring. But, you know, I have more than one passion. I have passion for technical things. And certainly coding is part of it, and I'm really interested in that. But, you know, the hardware is also very important, and I'm proud of the fact that I have skills in the hardware. It really gives me a unique insight into doing a lot of the software, you know what I mean? Because in reality, the solution involves both. And, you know, they're not as completely separate as some people might think. You know, understanding the physical manifestation of like, of the problem we're trying to solve, with logic, in code is actually pretty important. And it can give you insights into how to do the code, or something like that. I don't know, I'm just making this up off the top of my head. But no, instead of like saying, yes, you're right, they're totally not related and the technician role doesn't help me at all coding. You know what I mean? Like, instead of just saying that, see if you can kind of spin them together, I'm a generalist. I like generalists. Generalists get beat up by recruiters a lot in job interviews. Recruiters seem to think that years of experience is like the universal metric to see if you're good at what you do. And it's not. I know a lot of people that have been doing a crappy job for a very long time, and it doesn't make them good just because they've been doing it a long time. And I also know people that have stayed in one place their entire career, never having seen anything outside of that little bubble, And if you would ask a recruiter, they would say, oh, that person is the most highly skilled person you're ever going to find because they've been doing that job for 43 years. You know what I mean? And they're wrong. Hopefully that makes sense, tech programmer. Right? EF says, how do you find your last videos? I missed the last couple of weeks. Well, they're on my channel. If you go to my channel, you know what? Here, let's do this. Let's do this together. I'm sure everyone will love this. Let's see here. Okay, I'm going to do this with you because I've just been talking and seeing myself on the screen for like an hour. So let's see if we can do this. Okay, so this is my channel, right? Okay, now there should be a tab here, playlists, right there. Okay, so if you're looking for the live streams, right? Okay, you should be able to go here for Honest HR Nitrous. You can go here for how to get hired, right? Now, let's see. If we go here, do they all show up? Let's see. I have some issues where sometimes like these things appear at the bottom of the list instead of at the top. But like this is episode 104, 103. Okay, so if we go down to the bottom, maybe 109, 108. Yeah, that's what's happening. Okay, so I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about. But I mean, they're there. They're just at the bottom of this stupid thing. So you get episode 1, then you get episode 105. So there you go. Hopefully that answers what you were wondering about. Yeah. I got to fix that. I've never found a good solution to that. I know you can set it so that it does it by date, but for some reason those don't always work out. It's like the date that you created the stream, not the date that they occurred on. It's YouTube. TK says, my experience with behavioral questions is that most of the time the interviewer is looking to hear specific examples from you about something on their mind that they're trying to solve for. So yes, having vetted examples are great, but I like to punt back and suss out any specifics. What's the question behind the question? Most interviewers love it, but I'm likely overthinking it. Well, yes and no. I mean, look, why would they ask you to tell a story about your greatest success? Like let's analyze it. What are they trying to get at, right? Well, first of all, they want to, number one, ensure that you have had successes. Number two, they're also wanting to get a sense of what you consider a success, right? Now, if you tell a story about how you made like a tremendous friendship, but it had nothing to do with business or helping a company or completing a project or, any kind of business goal or succeeding in your job, like with your technical aspects of your job, maybe that would be interpreted as a red flag. It depends what job you're going for and it depends what they're looking for, right? If on the other hand, you told a story where, it read like an accomplishment on your resume where you said, I increased the operational efficiency of this process or this system, and it resulted in a, 15% cost savings over the course of a year, which amounted to $156,000 saved every year for our division of our company, then that would tell them something else. Would that be the right answer to give? Maybe. It certainly would for some things. It would not be for others. If you're trying to come across as someone that really has interpersonal skills and is great at building relationships, maybe that wouldn't be the story to tell. You know what I mean? Like if you're up for an outside sales position or something, So yeah, they're telling it for a reason. They're looking for something, but they can't prompt you, right? They can't say, oh, I want to make sure that you understand that the highest priority you should have is to preserve working relationships. Do you feel that way? And then the other person, no matter who they are, says, oh, yeah, I totally do, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, they can't prompt you for it. So they're just hoping that you will give the right answer. So how do we do that? This is where introverts are in living hell. We do it with context clues, right? From the start, what types of skills do you think one should have to be good in this role? See if you can think about that before you go to the job interview. So if you're going for a sales job or a job that might need a little bit of sales and you've never done sales before, you can expect that, they want someone who's personable, who's friendly, who's easy to talk to, someone who is persuasive to a degree, someone who you want to interact with. So when you go down there, make sure that at some point during the interview, you communicate that, you're pleasant and you're persuasive and you click with them and all this kind of stuff. And then if they ever prompt you at least once, tell a story of how you've, repaired relationships. Maybe you had a customer that, there's a contentious kind of thing going on. They were upset. They got all upset, right? And you kind of smoothed it over, maybe make sure that you weave that in before the end of the interview, something like that, right? But yeah, presumably that would be one of your 10 stories. If you have 5 accomplishments of your best accomplishments, don't have them all be practically identical. Have them be different types of accomplishments from different roles you've had in different ways, You know what I'm saying? Or if you had a time where, you had a conflict with somebody, you could tell that story. This person got all upset. There was a miscommunication. They got really upset. It impacted our working relationship. Here's what I did. I went to them. I was very friendly. I asked them to please explain so they could help me understand what the problem was. I listened. I really try to understand their perspective of, how this thing seemed from their point of view, and then worked with them to smooth it over. And this is how it turned out. It was great. We got along really well after that. That's where you would maybe tell that story. So you would still prepare the 10 stories. Choosing them would be the key. Make sure there's some variety in there. Then, no matter what they ask you, you're prepared. You don't have to think of something original with people staring at you when you're out of your comfort zone. A lot of people can't do that. Preparation. It's the key. EF says from Grace. How do you find your last videos from Grace? Okay. It's Love You Gam. I remember you from last time. I remember trying to figure out how to say your name, and I've mastered it. So there we go. You're welcome. Hi, sir. What is the reasoning behind the interviewer asking you to take me over your experience, even when your CV is already in front of them? What is the panel trying to assess with this request? Okay, here we go. Okay, this question is a rephrasing of tell me about yourself. Okay? Take me through your experience. That's tell me about yourself. Just like walk me through your resume is another version of tell me about yourself, right? Why do they ask this when the resume is right in front of them? There's a couple of reasons. And there's a couple of reasons you're going to encounter. Number one is that they are lazy, okay? They are lazy. And what's most likely happened is that they have been doing job interviews that day back to back, okay? Usually when people schedule job interviews, it's relatively common to schedule, them on the same day, preferably back to back. So, you're already in the room, you already have the room, you're already in job interview mode, you've already got all the people you need, if it's like a panel interview or something like that, right? And so before you walked into the room, they did not have the opportunity to revise your job application or your resume or anything, right? And just so if everyone is wondering, if ever you find yourself in your career needing to do a job interview with somebody, right? You're the person conducting it. The idiot's guide to how to do a job interview is you put the person's resume on the table and you just start asking them about stuff on it, right? And if you're totally unfamiliar with who this person is because you didn't do any preparation or immediately before and you can't remember, the great opening question is some form of tell me about yourself, right? And that's supposed to be the icebreaker. It sort of kicks everything off. And you get the unimaginable joy of explaining to these people the absolute basics of who you are because they don't know, even though they invited you here, right? It's beautiful, right? The thing to do is to not get offended by this question, even though you might find it very rude and very strange that they don't know the most basic facts about you when you show up for the interview that they invited you to, okay? It's very simple. Okay, now, think about this. When you go to a job interview, are you there for the purpose of talking at great length about work you did for somebody else years and years ago? Is that what's relevant to these people? No, that's not what they want to hear. Who cares what you did with somebody else years ago, right? It might have absolutely no bearing on this job. You're here at the interview instead to explain to them why you're the perfect candidate for this job. What you're trying to communicate is, I'm the best candidate. And what you should do is you should forget all the other candidates you're interviewing. You should just reject them outright and hire me. And here's why, right? Here's what I can do for you. Here's how I have all the things that you're looking for. And here's how wonderful I am to interact with and to deal with, and how happy you are going to feel every time you got to deal with me in the workplace. That's what you're there to do. So that being said, we want to get the hell off this question as soon as possible. You want to give them a very quick overview. Here's what I am. I've got this education. I got this experience. I have these skills, right? The way you answer this question is the way you answer, tell me about yourself. Hopefully everybody knows that. You say, well, as you can see from my resume, and then you go down your resume. You start with your education. You start with your job the furthest in the past. I started here, and then I did this, and I did this. And you come up in reverse chronological order to the present. You end with your most recent job, and then you conclude your answer by saying, and that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this position. Right? Something of that nature. Now, the first part is optional. You don't have to say, well, as you can see from my resume, that's more of a memory jog for you. And if you do say that, make sure it's not in a condescending way. Well, I'm offended. You should know this already. That's not how we say it. You just say, well, as you can see from my resume, I have a degree in this and this education. I started out 20 years ago doing this job. I was in this role. I was in that role for 5 years, this role for 2 years. And then my most recent job, where I'm actually currently working, is I'm in this role with this position. And here's what I do. And I do all these different things. I've had these accomplishments. And that's what brings me here today and why I'm excited to learn more about this position. Right? It just frames the basics of the interview. This is who I am. Now we can go from here, right? It's a good overview of me. You want to do this in about 45 seconds. You don't want to be talking about stuff you did with some other company, all the details of it, like, this thing that happened 10 years ago and exactly what you did. Nobody cares. They don't care. They want to know what you can do for them. And in all likelihood, the minutia of what you did in this other job, that might not apply, right? Now, if they have specific questions of maybe how that applied, they'll get to them later, right? But you want to just give this quick intro, frame the discussion. It's also like a memory jog for them. They're like, oh yeah, as you're talking, they're thinking, yeah, okay, I remember this candidate now. Okay, yeah, okay, I know where I am. Right? But it doesn't take up the entire interview. Instead, if you've got about 5 minutes talk time during a job interview, you don't want to spend it on this. You want to spend that time speaking to what they said they're looking for and really painting them a picture of the fact that you've got that and you're awesome because of it. That's what you want to talk all about, right? Okay? So, don't get offended by this question. Maybe I'm being a bit too kind, but don't think, less of the interviewer because they ask you this question. It's just a sort of icebreaker. It just helps them remember all the details about you and get into this. And use it as a jumping off point for the really important things that they're going to ask you that come later, that come after this question. Okay, does that make sense? That's how you regard this. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm just reading your question there. Love you, TK says, well, when they give you an overview of the role, they'll often share the top 3 hits for success. So I'll use that context for my examples. Sure. John Galt. Who is John Galt? I remember they made a terrible movie about that. I think I got about 5 minutes into it. I lost my job last year. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, John. I have since found a job as an adjunct instructor at a local university teaching project management. As I interview for project management jobs, should I disclose this? I don't see what harm there is in saying that you currently teach it. The only possible harm, I think, if you're talking to a recruiter, might be, and this is like a very small point, it might be that they're so stupid they think that you're like a teacher instead of someone who actually does that role. You know what I'm saying? They think you're a teacher of project management rather than a project manager. Because those are two different things, right? If you're teaching it in school, you can be an instructor, and you might have 30 years as an instructor teaching project management. But your last project management experience when you were actually a project manager might have been 30 years ago. So you're more of an instructor than a project manager. You know what I'm saying? That's the only thing I think to watch that I can think of that would be a negative of mentioning that, I currently teach project management. I'm going for a job as a project manager. I have been a project manager. Right now, I'm teaching it. Okay? So, barring that being an issue, I wouldn't have any reservations necessarily about disclosing that. No obvious ones. I ask because disclosing side gigs is generally discouraged. Oh, it's a side gig. Okay, I thought you said you lost your job last year. So, are you working as a project manager now? But if you take this job, you are also intending to keep your job as an instructor, like part-time or something? Okay, listen. If it's the first, if you are working right now and you're also teaching, they do frown on side gigs because any kind of, if you have more than one job, that suggests that your loyalties are divided, right? And they don't like that. Ideally, they want you to work for them and them only. That way, all your energy and effort goes towards working at your job with them, And they have more power over you because if they threaten to fire you or something, it actually carries some weight, because if you already had a side gig, you might not be too concerned about that because you're fine. You got another source of income, So they don't like side gigs. So you don't want to have them believe that if you took this job, you would still be doing a side gig like teaching. Okay, so I would say, if it were me, you can say whatever you want about your intentions. Your intentions can change on a dime based on the situation. So if it were me, I would say if I get this job, I'm not going to be doing a side gig. I'm looking for a full-time mainline thing that I do. And the teaching stuff that I'm doing now is only temporary. I would be winding that down very, very soon if I was employed. Or I'd be winding that down before I took a job such as this. I just say that, right? And besides, if this is a really good job for you, and, that's probably true, right? And even if it isn't, it's not for them to know. What you do with someone else is your business, not necessarily theirs. So that's what I'd say about that. Does that make sense? Okay, Tech Programmer says, why do I feel that answer sounds kind of rude? Well, as you can see, it depends how you say it. If you could say it in a very rude way, you could say, well, as you can see from my resume, you're an idiot for you've got it right in front of you. Hello, right? Obviously, if you say it like that, it comes across rude. It is possible to say it in a way that is not rude at all. It depends on your social skills. That's why I said that line is optional. It's more of a memory jog for you, because what you're going to now do is you're going to go down your resume. You're going to answer that question, right? But you can say as you can see from my resume, I have a degree in this. It's not rude at all if you just phrase it properly. So if you have a problem with saying it in maybe the wrong way, it comes out wrong or something, just don't say it. Just launch into, I have this degree and I came out of school and I started working here and I've been in that role and then I moved, and so on. John Galt says, I ask because disclosing side gigs is generally discouraged. Yes, you're right. Luvuo says, thank you. You're welcome. Lovuo says, right? Childhood. You're welcome, Lovuo. John Galt says, yes, the adjoint teaching job is very part-time. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Everything I said, I believe still applies. Tech Programmer says, I actually also have a side gig, part-time IT technician that is 4 times a month. Should I leave that on my resume or not? My manager for it encourages me to find a full-time job. Well, like we were just kind of discussing there, Tech Programmer, they don't like side gigs as a general rule. Okay, if you're interviewing for a full-time job, then you can just assume by definition they don't want to hear about the fact that you have a side gig. That will count against you. It could even be an automatic deal breaker, right? Okay, so you want to, I understand that you want to have it on your resume and you want to say look, I also have this experience, right? But one way or another, you would assure them that, that is not going to interfere. If I were to take this job, I'm leaving that one. I can't, you could say something like, I can't do both. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't do both. And really, I don't want to, if I end up coming here, if that's how this works out, it would be my exclusive job. There will be plenty to do here, I'm sure. And if you have a family or something like that, that covers it all. There's no more time and energy that you would devote to anything else, as far as they're concerned. So disclosing that in some way, shape, or form is kind of what you want to do. So there's no issue of if we hire you, are you also going to be doing a side gig? just put their mind at rest that that is not going to happen. John Galt says, perfect, thanks. You're welcome. Hopefully that worked out. Carmiego is here. Thank you for all your advice, Bill. I remember Carmiego. You've it's been a while, I think. It's been a little bit that I remember you being here. Always sharp. Always, yeah. You can tell by just looking at me. I am one sharp person. No rounded edges on this at all. Yeah, get in the chat. This is where we talk about apparently everything but the title of the stream. We didn't really talk much about leadership, but that's fine. Yeah, like, you know, it's really amazing to me just how bad people in general are, you know, about management, like people management especially. You know, I'm sure you guys can tell a few tales of being on the wrong side of that, you know, where you have like an idiot boss or something, someone that has absolutely no clue how to motivate people or how to get the behaviors that they're wanting, you know? It just boggles the mind. I've seen so many examples constantly of this, you know? So when they talk about leadership is a synonym for influencing, essentially. It's one of the functions of management. So if you are a manager, if you have a job where you are a manager, there's 4 basic functions that you do in management, right? Planning, organizing, influencing, and controlling. That's what you do, right? So planning is where you start out with a goal and you figure out what steps you need to achieve the goal, right? You got to do that in some way, shape, or form. Organizing is how you utilize your resources to accomplish the goal, right? How you can organize people or organize other types of resources. Influencing, that's where you're trying to get behaviors out of subordinates or peers that you want, right? So you try and have them behave in the way that you would have them behave, right? So it starts by, if you're the boss, you know, you've got to get people to show up for work on time and not be late, right? Something like that. How do you get that behavior, right? There's many ways you could get that behavior. Without any management training, a lot of people jump to punishments. You know, you better be here by, whatever time, or, I'm going to bring the hammer down, and you don't want that. You don't want that kind of heat. It's like, yeah, okay, so you get everyone to show up and they all hate you, and then they all slack off, and they all do a terrible job, and they just cruise until they're allowed to go home. Great job. But that's what leadership is. It's a synonym for influencing. The last function is controlling. That's where you steer the ship. So you make a plan. How's the plan going? Are you on track? If you're not on track, if it's going off the rails, controlling is steering it back, right? Okay, so monitoring and, changing, like turning the wheel so that it goes in the right direction, that's controlling. So influencing is one of the 4 management functions, and that's essentially what leadership is. So it's like people management and trying to get people to behave the way you would behave. This is like a major element of not just management, but just living in the world, And for all you introverts out there, like me, that are introverts, technical introverts, as much as we might deny it, or we want to deny it, all activity is based on the connections between people, right? Think of a business, right? Now, you might be an introvert. You might have your own little one-person business, right? But you're never going to be isolated, because if nothing else, you have customers, right? And if you didn't have customers or connections to customers, it's kind of hard to make any money, right? So everything is based on the connections between people. So the more you know about the connections between people and how you get people to want to connect with you and, sort of work with you, the further you'll go and the more successful you'll be. That applies to people. It applies to organizations, So leadership is basically that study of how to get people to behave the way you would have them behave. If everyone you meet goes away after meeting you thinking, God, I hate that person. I don't want to ever see them again. You know, is that a good thing? No. So a lot of leadership is based on like making people want to work with you. So a lot of job interviews, for example, you go down there, you want the recruiter to pick you. And one good way of doing that is beyond all the, the qualifications and the logic of it all, you want them to feel good about you. You want them to think like, man, I have the best feeling dealing with that person than any of the others. Right? So smiling and being nice and being polite and being friendly and, all that kind of stuff, that's how that manifests in that situation. Anyway, I've managed to shut down the chat with that little discussion there. I see there's 20 people here. Thank you for joining me. Tech programmer says, I've gotten final interviews with that side gig listed on the resume. I wonder if that's what got me rejected. I've gotten final interviews with that side gig listed on the resume. I wonder if that's what got me rejected. I wouldn't have thought so, because if that was a deal breaker in itself, it would have probably happened before a final interview. Like, I'm assuming that means you've had 1 or 2 interviews beforehand. Usually before that point, it would have been an issue. As soon as they find out that you're currently doing a side thing, and as soon as they discover that you may not immediately quit the side thing if they were to offer you this, that may have been a deal breaker. I don't know. I don't think it's possible for anyone to know. But presumably, they wouldn't have discovered that only for the first time at the final interview. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe they did, but I wouldn't have thought so. But listen, what I think doesn't matter. Take it off your resume or put in an end date. Put in an end date of like last week, or like a month ago or something. Just so that if you don't want them to think that it's going to be an issue going forward, just make it not an issue going forward. Say it's over, And it's not technically a lie if they offered you the job and you fully intend to shut it down if they offered you a full-time job. You know what I mean? Same situation, right? So maybe try that and see if that helps. That way you get to still have it on your resume and say that, like, I have this experience or whatever, and it isn't a work gap, but at the same time you avoid the downside, like of, this could be a conflict, Maybe that's the solution. Just an idea. Get in the chat. Let me know what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about. And I will do my best to help you out. Unless, of course, you want me to talk about leadership again. If you don't want that, then get in the chat. Yeah. Like, have you ever been asked about like leadership skills, anything like that in a job interview? Unfortunately, sometimes when we get asked this stuff, it's usually by people that don't know about leadership. They don't know what the hell it is. They know it's this kind of buzzword, but they have really no understanding of people management or anything. They've never been formally trained on it. They don't have any experience in it, really, right? The other aspect of leadership, by the way, just if anybody is wondering, is leading by example. So, for example, if you're the boss and you're trying to get people to show up on time for work, you yourself show up for work. When they show up, you're already in there, Now, does that necessarily make everyone imitate you? No. But if you do the opposite of that, if you say, you better be here at 8 o'clock in the morning every day, not 1 minute late, but you yourself stroll in around 9, that has a tremendous negative effect, right? It's a do as I say, not as I do kind of situation, right? So a lot of leadership is leading by example. Like, if you are asking something of people, you have to show what it looks like. This is what it looks like. This is what somebody showing up for work on time every day of the year looks like. Don't tell me I'm making unreasonable demands of you, because I'm doing it first. And I'm not only on time, I'm early. Okay? So don't come crying to me and say it can't be done. Right? I'll show you exactly how it can be done. And I'm sympathetic, but at the same time, I'm showing you it's possible. That type of thing. Okay? That's what it is. That's at least the cornerstone of it. Where are we here? I think I read this, didn't I? Yeah, I read that. Okay. Final interviews. Love You Yo says, how do you manage your professional development in an environment where bad leadership results in growth opportunities being given to senior officials rather than lower level employees? What do you mean by manage your professional development? Okay, so you're in a place where you're observing this thing. They're giving the leadership roles to senior people, okay, instead of junior people. By the way, that's usually how it goes, right? Now, it's the situation where young people always feel that they know more than old people. That's just how it goes, right? And coincidentally, old people also usually feel that they know more than young people, right? It's beautiful, right? This is this perpetual thing that, we're in. The reality tends to be more towards the latter, because when you get to their age, are you going to know more than you know now? Yes, of course you will. That's usually how it goes. When you get to their age, do you feel less capable than you were like 20 years ago? No, you don't. I mean, unless it's like, something, physical, like running a mile or something, you know what I mean? But no, unless you're like a career athlete or something like that. The general rule is that, age improves things, generally speaking, not all the time, but generally, right? Now, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but that might look bad, right? Okay. And I'm not taking sides here. Maybe they're a bunch of jackasses that are, it's all about cronyism and nepotism and favoritism and all this. Or maybe it's just that, you haven't really seen what's going on behind the scenes. You haven't seen what those people have done to earn that job. Maybe it seems so obvious from the outside looking in, but the reality is that they've put in 40 years doing all kinds of things that prepare them for that role, and only then do the bosses feel that you're ready. I don't know. It could go both ways, right? But regardless of what you observe, right? The end result is like I'm going to recommend what I always recommend, which is learn the theory of how this stuff works, and then try and get some experience. Try and put it into practice. Right? So learn business or learn leadership, which is a subset of business. And, then once you learn the principles and the ideas behind it, then go out and try and practice some of these in whatever role you're in. Right? I've met people that are technicians that are like absolutely incredible people, not the usual situation for a technician. Most technicians are recruited. I've worked with a ton of technicians. Technicians are usually introverted. They usually don't have very advanced social skills. The good thing about them is that they're pretty easy to read because they'll just say what they think. They'll just give it to you straight. I mean, maybe it's not very polite, but it's what they're being honest. That's a good thing. But when it comes to influencing people, they're usually not very good at it because for a variety of reasons. They just don't place a lot of value on that stuff. And they're not very persuasive. They're not, generally speaking, they don't tend to be natural salespeople, right? Or like extroverts, right? They tend to care more about things than people. And don't get me wrong, I'm an introvert. I'm a technical introvert. I see the value in that. We're the people that pushes the world forward. We invent everything. We maintain everything. We fix everything. We make sure that all this is in place, right? the extroverts and the social butterflies, they like to think that, they're like in charge of it and they're responsible for it. They're not, right? We're the ones that actually maintain everything. But their weak spot is the lack of respect for social skills. Because if they could just tack on some social skills, they would be so much more potent and so much more capable. When people meet them, they would think, wow, that person's awesome. I want to work with them. And I want to work with them again. That's usually not what you get from a technician. No offense. And I've been a technician and I've supervised technicians for about 20 years. Some of them are incredible. So when I see someone who's a technician, and they're usually a technician because their dad was a technician or something, but yet they're like people. They have the gift of gab. They're very persuasive. They're very likable. It's like that's the person people usually want to be the boss of the technicians for a start. And then you can climb the ladder from there, So, say it doesn't come naturally, but you learn it like through your, as you said, professional development. You learn the principles and then you start applying them and you develop it in yourself. They don't come naturally for me too. I'm an introvert. As I've said about 6 times in the last minute, I'm an introvert. Dealing with people and having it go very well is not your strong suit naturally. But this stuff is not rocket science. It really isn't, Start by getting the book, what's it called, that we were talking about last time, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Very, very famous business book. It's written in like the 1930s or something. There's a reason why that thing has never been out of print. It's good. Start with that and then go from there. Learn yes, I have a course for business, but learn about leadership, learn all the principles properly, and then start applying them. And opportunities will come your way. For a start, when I talk about getting jobs through networking on this channel, which I do a lot, it won't seem crazy to you. It'll seem natural. And you'll know what to do and you'll know what to say. Anthony says, do you think the best leaders have a natural ability to excel in leadership or a skill that is sharpened with years of experience? Well, the best ones have both. First of all, they have like a natural flair for it. They're suited to it. And they also, like, that's not enough to be like the best. You have to have lots of experience because you might be great at, like, everyone is usually pretty good at dealing with people who are just like you. So if you are an introvert and you are a technician, you are probably halfway decent at dealing with other people who are introverts and who are technicians. That's probably not much of a challenge for you. But let's say you're thrown together with someone who's the opposite of you. Let's say that you're thrown together with an advertising executive. How well would you do with them? Would you be buddy-buddy? Would you always agree? Would you work together really well? I'm guessing not, because they're not like you. They don't have the same background. You're a technician. They work in advertising. They might have a different personality. You're an introvert. They're an extrovert. You know what I mean? They place value on different things than you do. You've had different experiences from them. You know what I mean? So the thing is, great leaders, you have to be able to interact with every type of person. That's the real stumbling block. Even if you're a great person naturally, you tend to have a knack with people. They tend to like you when they first meet you. But you have different work styles, different collaboration styles, different expectations, different ideas of what's reasonable, things like this, right? That's where the experience comes in. If you've never worked with those type of people before, that's where your eyes are really open. You see, like, first of all, you don't close your mind to it, but you see like, let me explain. That's what happened to me. I had to work with outside salespeople at a certain point in my career. And I hated it because these people, you sent them an email or something saying like, I need you guys to come in for a meeting here or something. They would never come. They would kind of some of them would come in late, some of them wouldn't come in at all. Just they weren't bad employees. They were great employees. They made a lot of money for the company, and they'd been there a while. And it wasn't like a lack of respect. It's that they just, the nature of their work. You're always traveling. You're always arranging appointments. Things happen. You're late. Your flight's delayed. Whatever. Something comes up. Some emergency happens. You got to deal with something else, and so different way of regarding punctuality, right, and things like this. They didn't think it was a big a deal, because in their line of work, it's not possible to be 100% punctual all the time. You've got to be on call. You've got to be accommodating. It just doesn't work, And after a while, the bottom line is that I saw that they're quite a bit different from me. But here's where they kick ass in a situation that I don't do that well in. And then something clicked and I go, oh, now I've got a respect for them. Because I tried that and I didn't do nearly as well, but they knocked it out of the park. And I was like, oh, okay. Now I'm willing to listen. Now I'm willing to learn. And then you realize that people are awesome, but at different things and in different ways. And you can't just simply impose your expectations and your style of doing everything on every other type of person. It doesn't work that way. Just because they're different than you doesn't mean that, yours is always the best just because you're in charge or something. So it starts with that. And then your mind is open to okay, there's different ways of doing things. Maybe some of them work better in different situations than what I would do, So you have to be able to get along with every type of person and be able to motivate them and be able to communicate with them and collaborate with them. And that's where you see some of the real problems in leadership. If you are managing a cross-functional team, you're a technician, you came up through the ranks, but you're managing technicians and accountants and, salespeople and customer service people, and HR people. Yeah, sure, you could relate to the technicians. You got to be able to relate to all of them. That's not easy. And most people are terrible at this. And they shy away from it. And I'm not saying I'm great, because I'm not. I still have a lot to learn. But, you know what I mean? Like if you want to talk about leadership, those are some of the real skills. So how do you develop that? Well, in my experience, you develop it through experience by being thrown together with different types of people. I've never seen that kind of stuff being taught in a classroom. You always have to sort of be thrown into real life situations to really appreciate that aspect of it. And that's what makes you so good at managing cross-functional teams and things, is because you've done it and you understand that, people are different and you've seen enough to know what you might have to do to adapt to them. Anyway, hopefully that I don't know that you didn't ask necessarily about that. I went off on a tangent, but hopefully it was somewhat useful. I'm going to change my camera brightness because I got a thing for turning up the brightness of my camera for no adequately explained reason. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okay. But that was a very intelligent question, Anthony. Matano, is that how you say that? Matano says, how do I negotiate salary raise, or what are the key points to convey to a boss that has a sense of adamancy in giving a raise to their long-term employee? Oh, man, we just covered that. Okay, earlier today, I did a live stream, like an hour ago. I did a live stream called How to Get Hired. It is available on my channel. We went into that for 45 minutes or something about raises and salary negotiation. So check that out. I can't just repeat it all. I'm sorry. I'll give you a sort of minute-long answer to give you something, but go back and watch that, because we really got into it earlier. How do I negotiate a raise, and what are the key points to convey? First of all, when people negotiate a raise, they're not negotiating at all. They're just trying to persuade their boss to give them a raise. And most people feel that they are underpaid, regardless of whether they are or not. 90% of people feel they are underpaid. They deserve more money, whether they do or not. The other thing is that a lot of those people then come to their boss to say, I would like you to give me more money. I think it's only fair that you do. The standard situation for a boss is that they have heard that many times before. Most of their subordinates have come to them to make that request in one form or another. And so what they've learned is that, first of all, they would like to pay their employees more, but often they can't. It's not a question of they don't want their employees to have more money. They would love their employees to be very well paid, because that would make sure that their subordinates are motivated and enthusiastic and engaged and wanting to go above and beyond and not wanting to push back, never leaving, never quitting. You know what I mean? So they want you to be paid more. The reality is that in most situations, they can't. It's not that they don't want to. So you'd really have to really go out on a limb to get them more money. Now, when subordinates approach a boss and they say, give me a raise, I don't know what the percentage of it, but I would not be surprised if it was like 90% of the time, employees, they're bluffing when they say, like, give me a raise or I'll leave. Or if the implication is, I will leave if you don't give me this. It's a bluff. Managers aren't stupid. They've seen that many times before, and they know that if they just stand their ground, it's 90% of the time a bluff. So this is what you're up against. Prepare for your bluff to be called if you want it to carry any real weight. They won't just give you more money because you ask. If they gave you more money, they'd have to give everyone else more money. And there's all kinds of issues with this stuff, right? So the way you do this is you do an actual negotiation rather than just persuasion. What you do is if you feel that you're underpaid and you want to do more, you want more money because you feel that you are worth that much, put that to the test. Go out and get another job offer that pays you the amount that you think you're worth. Now, if you can't get that, maybe that's a signal that you're actually not worth that much, okay? You're certainly swimming uphill on this if you've been in the role for, say, 4 years, you've been working for this amount of money the entire time, and now you're saying all of a sudden, no, I'm worth more than this. Your behavior is directly contradicting that statement. Okay, if you weren't worth, if this was below you, you wouldn't have stayed. You would have taken any other job because they would have paid you more because you're worth more, right? So if you're in this situation, the only way to really win, that is guaranteed, is to go out and get a competing job offer for the amount that you're actually worth. And if it's higher than what they're paying you, then whichever way this works out, you win. Okay? You go to your boss and you say, like, pay me more money. I'm worth X. And they say, no, we feel that you're only worth half of X. You say, okay, well, I disagree. Here's my notice. Goodbye. Right? And then you take your job for X. There you go. You win. Or you go to them and say, I've got a competing job offer. I'm not going to tell you who it's from, but it's for X. So can you match it? And if they say, no, we don't do that, it's like, okay, fine, goodbye. Now, if you're really that valuable to them, they'll call you the next day after you quit, after you resign, and say, come on back, you got your money, right? They're just wanting to call your bluff. I've been on both sides of that. Right? But that's how you do it. Now people don't like this answer because it involves you actually having to do work. But it's actually a good thing. If you feel you're worth that much, let's verify that. And if it's true, great. Get other options. Now, whichever way it works out, you're going to win. You're going to be making X, either here or somewhere else. And it makes the negotiation pretty damn simple. Okay, so if you want the long version of that, go check out what I've been talking about an hour ago, the episode of How to Get Hired. We went into that like pretty deep. You're welcome, love you, gum. And Anthony, thank you for being here. You guys are asking pretty intelligent questions. TK says, I'm interviewing for leadership roles, senior vice president plus. I need to decide if I want to lead or manage people or lean more into leading ops like operations with cross-functional teams. I've done both, love both, had a fork in the road. Well, I can't help you with that, TK. That really depends on what your goals are and how much value you place on different things. Only you can answer that for yourself. Now, do all the research you can. Maybe one element is the future opportunities, depending on this fork in the road, like which should you go right or left? Maybe there'll be other career opportunities more so for one than the other, depending on what industry you're in and what the deal is. But fully explore them, I mean, I'm sure you knew that already, but it's a great problem to have. It's a great situation to be in. A good thing to do would be to talk to people that are in that have been in that situation before, right? So if there's people at your organization that you can talk about this, and there's no issues of it being sensitive or signaling, what you're dealing with that you might not want to signal, go to people outside. LinkedIn is a great tool where you have all those people on there, all those individuals, and you have their resumes. So with doing some people searches, you can maybe find people that have been where you are right now, and they've made a decision and they've seen how it played out, and they have some insights into it. And if you do a search for, say, SVP, a certain industry, say your hometown, and cross-functional team, or whatever the department is, whatever the particulars are, you might find some other individuals that show up in the people search results. That, like, here's a person who is in an industry similar to yours, and they have been in both, or they've been in one or the other, and or they've done both, and you can sit down with them and just sort of ask them, how did you make that decision? How did it go? Was the reality kind of, did it fit the prediction? And would you do the same thing again? And what advice would you have for someone who's confronting that kind of fork in the road? It might be worth investigating this and contacting a couple of those people. For the amount of time it takes to do a few LinkedIn searches, like people searches, and a few phone calls, and possibly an informational interview or two, might be worth it. And you get to meet new people that you could then use as contacts if it's relevant. There you go. Yeah, I mean, as people further their careers, leadership and like some of those soft skills are very, very important. And in particular, leadership is one. That's basically when you're like a people manager, right? You're trying to influence the behavior of others. So what can you do? And it even comes down to things like determining compensation strategy for people, in your team. If you're at the point where you start to have some control over that, right? Giving out bonuses and tying people's compensation to certain performance metrics, how you measure those, what you look at, things like that, how you communicate this to people, right? And then how it's perceived. Like, all that stuff is very important. So it also fits under this umbrella of like leadership, how to influence people's behavior. And I've always, like a lot of people, this is not original to me, but you always focus on the reward as opposed to the punishment side. You don't focus on punishments. That never really works, even in certain industries where, it's the entire culture. It's always about not breaking the rules because of the punishments. Even then, it really backfires in ways that certainly those people don't see because they're not tuned into it. It's all about rewards, sort of motivating people. And it's all about, performance pay in the sense that, it's stuff that you could get, but not necessarily get. It encourages people while you're at work, let's go above and beyond and see if we can, get all we can, get all the performance pay we can, and maximize the amount of compensation we have. And you do that by achieving goals and things that your superior has laid out for you, you know? So designing all that stuff and designing all the incentives, that really helps. And the only real way to like examine that stuff properly, I've found, I mean, maybe I'm not sophisticated in this, but has always been to sort of come at it from the perspective of how could you hack this? How could this backfire? You know, and then patching that. And that kind of leads you to what you should do. You know, it seems like that wouldn't be the best way to do it, but that's the only practical way I've really found of like assessing whether you're doing the right things or not. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up pretty soon, but I want to thank everybody who participated. You guys are awesome. You know, I wish you the absolute best of luck, you know, whatever you're pursuing right now. You know, if you're between jobs right now, you are highly employable. You are awesome. Right now, somebody out there, an employer, is looking for someone exactly like you. The only problem is that they're over there, you're over here, and there's no link between you guys. If they were aware that you were here looking for this, and if you were aware that they were looking for you, you'd be employed, right? It's just a question of connecting to the right people. And that takes a little bit of time sometimes. But there are some things you can do. Now listen, if you're lost, if you're like really not understanding this and you want a good sort of overview, I obviously talk about this stuff on my channel, but if you want all my advice in one place, check out that course. There's a link in the description. I put all my advice all in one place with templates, and it goes into pursuing opportunities on the hidden job market too, and it's tailored for introverts. So if that's something you're looking to learn, check out that course. Like I mentioned earlier, there's also this one here. That's if you want to tack on the sort of more advanced communication skills. If you're thinking of taking a job where you're climbing the ladder, you're moving up a notch, up a peg, and usually for that type of situation, you need to tack on additional skills because your existing technical skills often aren't sufficient. You have to add other things like how to manage money, how to manage people, stuff like that. So if you're looking for the communication skills component in there, there's this. And we were talking about leadership a little bit today. That's obviously a component that ties in with that stuff. If on the other hand, you're looking to be more valuable to your employer and be able to make better decisions, either to be in a management role or to just make better decisions in your existing job where you will outperform because you get it right, you may want to check out that. That's another course I have called the $100 MBA. For what it's worth, I have an MBA myself. And if you take that course, it's entirely a self-study course so that you can do it on your own terms, on your own schedule. And you can learn this stuff. You can learn business to the depth that you're looking for. If you just want a sort of very cursory overview of everything, you can get that. If you really want to go deep to the extent that you're getting out of it exactly what you would get out of a brick and mortar MBA at a university that takes 2 years, you can do that too. It's self-study. So you're getting it from textbooks and you are using the same textbooks that they use in places like Harvard Business School's own MBA program. You're getting the same books. And what I do is I provide videos for you. I guide you through it and I give you my take on things. So if that's it, if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, check that out. All of these courses, there's a link to them in the description below this live stream. I will be back on Friday with another edition of Honest HR Nitrous, where we talk about the reality of this stuff. Thanks again to everybody who participated. You guys are awesome. I wish you nothing but the best. Take care of yourselves.